Hey everybody, welcome to our most recent Master Your Marketing webinar in the Master Your Marketing series. Today we have Convirza here to present how to use call analytics to increase your ROI. My name is Kate Lombardo. I am the Content Marketing Manager of Main Street ROI, and we're really excited to have everybody on the line with us today. So we'll move through these slides to go through, tell you a little bit more about our series. So the Master Your Marketing series, we've been partnering since August with industry experts, and they've all agreed to share their best, most up-to-date digital marketing advice. This is running through December of 2017. So after today, we have 2 more left, and hopefully looking into another one starting in 2018 as well. It's completely free to register, as you all probably know, so we're all set. This is our upcoming schedule. We have Fred from Optimizer will be presenting in November, and Beth from Acquisio will be presenting in December. So a couple housekeeping things as we get started today. There's a Q&A box in your GoToWebinar window. You can post any questions that you have throughout the webinar in there. We'll be saving the answers to these questions for the end during our Q&A session, but we'll make sure to keep track of them along the way and get those answered for you. And then our other recommendation, and we always find you get way more out of the webinar if you turn off distractions. So close out Facebook, try to log off your email, and really take time over the next hour to connect to what you're doing now. And we'll get focused and get some good digital marketing tips. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to David from Convirza to get started with today's webinar.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kate. Hey, everybody. This is David Danielson. Super excited to meet you guys today. Just by way of quick introduction, this is a picture of my ugly mug. You guys can actually get a face with a name. And I'm a product marketing manager here at Convirza. I love playing tennis when I'm not doing marketing. And one fun fact about me is I skied 90 days in a single season. And if you think about the math on that, that's a lot of days in very few winter days. So we crammed it in. One year, a buddy of mine and I, we quit our jobs and decided to be complete ski bums for a whole season. So just wanted to give you kind of a little peek into who I am. And today, what I want to do is I want to actually focus on a barrage of topics, and arguably, this is a lot of information. I've made this actionable. I want to make sure that what you're getting out of this is a very good educational experience. And my goal today is that you walk away knowing something more about how to leverage and optimize calls or call analytics to improve your business. And whether you use us or somebody else, I think that there's going to be something in here for you that's going to create value for you and your business. Some of the highlights of the things that we're going to talk about are some of the new insights into what's happening in the market, really evaluating some of the trends and how they're impacting your business. We're going to talk about some common types of businesses that should definitely be using call tracking. If you're not, you're literally throwing money away. We're going to give you some quick tips on how to get started with call tracking. That's a little bit bundled together with some information about some call tracking topics. If at any point in time you have a question, don't hesitate to drop it into the chat. We're going to go through at the end. We're going to pick those up, make sure we get your questions answered. We're definitely going to go through and explain a little bit about what dynamic number insertion is. It's one of the key technologies that a real call tracking company would provide you. We're going to talk about there's some big questions in the market about how does DNI impact SEO, particularly local SEO. So we'll touch on that, give you a little bit of data there. We'll talk to you a little bit about a case study for one of our clients and some of the success that they created for themselves by partnering with us. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about conversation analytics and why it's an important component of a good call tracking vendor. And then we're going to show you how that actually drives real-time revenue. Other than that, there's going to be some other tips and tricks for generating calls. And I want to make sure that at the end of this presentation, you understand how call tracking helps you actually map your full customer journey from website traffic to an appointment to a call to a sale. So with that, we're going to jump right in. And if you feel like I'm moving too fast, ping the chat, and Kate's going to look at it for me occasionally. But the very first thing I want to do right now is I want to give a quick little picture of the audience. So if you could just take a minute, drop into the chat, and tell me a little bit, just post your title. Are you an owner? Are you a marketer? Are you a manager? Are you responsible? You know, whatever it is that you are, just quickly drop it into the chat so I can get a good idea of kind of our audience mix today. Usually I have a polling question, but for whatever reason, it slipped my mind to create it, and but I still want to know who's on the call today. Are you guys able to post to the chat?
David, I think a lot of them are coming in on the question and answer box, it looks like, if you're able to see it there. It seems that we've gotten some. All right,
let me go look at that instead. Yeah. Yeah, so for whatever reason, I'm not seeing anything in there yet. You're seeing them, Kate?
I am. So we have a mix. We've got some marketing specialists, client success strategists, marketing coordinators, owners of ad agencies, advertisers, business directors, directors of digital marketing.
Perfect. Yeah, I can't see it today. So whatever is going on with GoToWebinar, I'm blind. So well, you're going to have to tell me everything.
You got it.
All right. Hey, well, thank you so much, everybody, for chiming in. And I really want to touch on kind of how those things touch each in all of your roles. If you're an ad agency, you're actually going to love this. In some ways, it's a little bit basic on the call tracking, but you're going to find that there are insights in here that you would never get in any other presentation like this. So that's going to be great. Anybody who touches marketing, I think in the future, people are going to put a lot more emphasis on call analytics. I'll tell you why that is in just a second. But reality is that we now live in a completely data-driven world. And I don't know about you, I've been in marketing for a number of years. I spent a lot of time in marketing a few years ago and then went away and decided that I loved it and came back. So one of the things that I realized in that absence is there used to be a lot of gut feel in marketing. And we did shoot for ROI. We just didn't have the ability to drive it at the metrics level the way we do today. And that's still exploding. And what we're actually seeing, you know, specifically around calls is that the attitude of companies is changing. And we are becoming much more engagement driven as businesses. So what happens in our emails, what happens in our chats is all about creating a conversation with our clients. And when you have that focus, then you're going to realize that not knowing what's happening on your calls is actually a huge blind spot for many types of organizations. And if you just look at what's happened, people quote this often, the volume of inbound calls to businesses from mobile has skyrocketed. I mean, we're getting into the literally, there was a study that they were projecting that the volume of calls was going to reach like 169 billion calls per year over the next couple more years. And we basically went from people not calling businesses from their digital devices to basically everybody's calling businesses from digital devices. Digital marketing spend has changed the way we reach customers. It's changed the way we've engaged with them. And obviously, the vast improvement in technology has made a lot of these things possible. I mean, think about the world before the iPhone, and we really didn't go online on our phones before that. I mean, just imagine doing it on the old BlackBerry. It was horrible. So when you start thinking about this technological shift, this direction towards digital marketing, the inbound calls that are happening, what's happening is it's actually transitioning people back to what I would consider modern day face-to-face relationship type business models. And so what's happening is we're actually going the opposite direction. We're not broadcasting to the world. We're having very targeted messages with the goal of actually having a conversation. And if you look at even in enterprise marketing, you're seeing all these strategies around account-based marketing. Really what they're saying is we want to have a specific conversation with a specific type of audience. And that hasn't changed. It's only accelerating. You're just seeing the outcome, the symptom of that as businesses are trying to get closer to their clients. So what does that mean in terms of pressure on businesses? And if you break this down, this is what I hear routinely from our clients and from industry. Basically, they're saying, we know that you can measure more, so you need to help me reduce our cost of acquisition for clients. We need to prove marketing value. We need to shore up and figure out which lead sources and which lead channels are generating the highest quality and best leads. We really want to get to this idea of closed loop attribution. And if you're not aware of what that is, that's really attributing every marketing dollar back to a customer coming in the door. So this goal of getting that insight continues to drive those things because people really want to know, what is the best path for marketing to my customers today? Is it a phone call? Is it an email? Is it a, whatever channels you're using for marketing? And I call that your distribution system. Whatever distribution system you have set up, which components of it are working the best and in what ways? Next piece is that we really need to move past this idea of last touch attribution. That means that as a marketer, just because somebody showed up at your trade show doesn't mean that that sale should be attributed directly to the trade show, especially if they've been to your website 5 times, they've called you twice. That sale, the visit to the trade show booth is just a step in their journey of getting closer to you. Now, whether it's a trade show or walking into your showroom floor or depending on your business, just think about that as an analogy. We need to move past whatever that last touch was. We want to get a better picture for those previous touches, bringing those things together. Obviously, we all feel the pressure to drive revenue for our businesses. And the one that I think is really interesting recently for me is this upsurge in capitalizing on our web traffic. Whether you're spending money on advertising, bringing people to you, or you're doing some form of content marketing or inbound marketing, what we're finding is that people are getting increasingly more concerned about capitalizing on their web traffic. Is it turning into leads? Is it turning into things that we can engage with? So one of the things that I wanted to focus on today was give you kind of a high-level preview of call tracking, which of the businesses that you are working in or working with leverage the most, and kind of help wrap around some of these challenges that we're facing and show you how call analytics, or in our case, call tracking and conversation analytics, ties those things together. So right now, the way that I would characterize this, there are a handful of industries that absolutely live and die by phone calls. And if you think about it, if you are a handyman and you specialize or you roll a truck, for example, and you're a contractor, plumbers are the perfect example. When your plumbing is leaking, you don't wait to pick up the phone. You're going to call. You need to call those guys. And what I think is really interesting is a lot of these industries that leverage call tracking are doing it for themselves and their clients. But what's been very interesting on my side of it is the new industries that are adopting call tracking. I used to think that it was going to be just the places that had storefronts, but increasingly I'm starting to see SaaS companies offer it. I'm starting to see marketing agencies leverage call tracking for themselves. I'm starting to see areas where I didn't think there was going to be as much emphasis, but the market, because of all these calls that people are generating, the value of that call information is increasing, so people want to do it, and it's not expensive to get into it. So just to highlight a few, agencies, I'm seeing it every single day. We're closing a deal with an agency. Auto dealerships, definitely. Auto service providers, definitely. Call centers and contact centers, they're definitely looking at metrics around their call performance. education industry, financial services, healthcare, healthcare particularly around dentists, audiologists, anybody who provides services in a medical context, orthodontists, anybody, the specialists in wisdom teeth, all those guys are using call tracking, and if they're not, they should be. So you're starting to see it broaden out. Some of our best customers that have seen the most improvement are an industrial equipment company. Believe it or not, they sell multi-million dollars worth of skids and bulldozers, and those guys are using call tracking because it's helping them convert more deals. This is just a good start to the list, but the reality is that it's growing, and that's really exciting for us and for you if you're looking to take advantage of marketing opportunities in any of those verticals. So here are kind of my basic rules and what I consider best practices for evaluating the importance of call tracking for a business. One, does your product cost more than $200? Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if you're selling the spinners that all the kids are playing with, you're probably not a great fit for call tracking. But if you're selling some type of upgrade or a home service or any type of even physical products that have a couple $100 price point, that's usually about the threshold where I see people clipping in. And keep in mind that this is a product cost or a service cost. If you're selling a subscription, many of your subscriptions out there are about $200 or $300 a year. And that would definitely fit into this kind of bucket. So even if you have a small subscription, those things add up month over month. And so I would look at the lifetime value of the customer and how that's going to apply to them. One, that's probably the easiest rule to kind of start with. The second rule is, do you actually want to listen to phone calls? It's surprising to me that if you're not listening to phone calls, you don't know if your messages are resonating. You don't know if those promotions are happening. You don't know if your clients are converting. And it's very valuable to have that ability to listen to calls, particularly on the marketing side, definitely value on the sales training side. But I'm going to show you some data on that a little bit later in our presentation. Very interesting. Do you roll a truck? If you roll a truck, guaranteed you should be using call tracking. Do you want to find out which keywords are converting to appointments and or sales? If you are a PPC marketer or an SEO marketer and you want to find out which keywords are the ones that are the best for closing deals, it's very different than having great SEO for keywords that just drive traffic that don't turn into clients. And having the ability to see that data because of the link between those keywords and phone call, incredibly valuable. Obviously, improving PPC attribution, we'll go into some detail on that. So if any of these 5 things touch you or your business, then you would probably be a very good candidate for call tracking. Now, one of the things I want to hit on here is this idea of what kinds of campaigns use call tracking specifically. We see it now prolifically with PPC or AdWords campaigns. Just knowing that your AdWords spend, just because it didn't turn into a demo request and it turned into a call, doesn't make that a misspent dollar. And so when people start to get that visibility, they're realizing, hey, there's some instant value here in being able to say, these PPC keywords are actually turning into more than just web form fills or email signups. Some of them are turning into calls, which is actually driving real-time value to the business. Incredible. Obviously, social media. One of the overlooked categories I see often has to do with banner ads and email marketing, and then just overall evaluating your website property, figuring out which were your last pages before people called you. Very interesting data. So those would be kind of on, I would consider on the digital front. Obviously, most of those industries I referenced before have traditional marketing as well. They're not completely abandoning what's been working tried and true for them for years. And so you're going to find a lot of those companies still run flyers, print ads, newspaper, magazine, and they're leveraging call tracking to get analytics on all of those components. Obviously, TV and radio, and what I would consider in the category of outdoor advertising. We used to call them billboard advertising, but outdoor advertising I think has evolved quite a bit. Even in my area, we see a lot of like digital versions of outdoor advertising. So you're seeing a lot more of that type of marketing, and it's very easy for people to remember a phone number if you apply some strategies there. In some cases, it's easier than remembering a URL. So we'll touch on that a little bit later. To kind of dig into the weeds about why some of these things are valuable for organizations, the first one I want to touch on is really around this concept of DNI. And I would consider DNI probably one of the most overlooked technologies in a marketer's tool belt. And really what I want to do is I want to focus in on 4 key concepts around DNI and why people should be thinking about it and how they should be thinking about it. But what we find customer after customer is that implementing DNI is basically a guaranteed way for you to improve your attribution by about 33%. So I've seen it for some clients, it fluctuates much higher than that. And for others, it's lower. But when we averaged out the data based on the study that I did recently with our clients, that number really hovers in right around 33%. So if you want to make better decisions about the types of traffic that are making calls, generating calls, and bringing clients to your business, making sure that you have some form of DNI on your website is definitely going to influence how valuable your website is and that traffic is to you. So here are 4 key concepts that you should know, or some language behind them. First one is visitor level tracking. And visitor level tracking at a high level is tracking a visitor who comes to your website, and whether he makes a phone call today, tomorrow, or in the future, you're going to keep track of him every step of his journey. Session level DNI is really a vehicle for gathering data for visitor DNI. So session DNI is about gathering the specific information from each of those visits. Visitor level tracking really is in conjunction with Google Analytics. So what we do is we provide it's like 3 fields, super easy integration to send your call data into Google Analytics. That helps you get to that visitor level tracking. Session DNI is the stuff that we provide natively just with us. Source DNI is really around just categorizing calls by channel. So if you only care to know that your calls are coming from Google or Facebook or from Yellow Pages, then you can use a source DNI strategy to make sure that you are aggregating those calls. And I'll show you a quick example of that. And then the overlooked one I think really is this URL or link DNI, which is using links in other media to basically control and figure out if those vehicles are generating calls. It was very surprising to me to find out that we had a handful of marketing campaigns, email marketing campaigns, and people were actually not registering for our form, but the copy was compelling in a way that actually drove a lot of calls. And so we were able to connect that visit to our landing page to a phone call, and it actually proved that that campaign was actually much more successful than we previously thought. So let's just go in, let's just talk about the mechanics of this, walk you through it really briefly. This is kind of a quick example of session DNI. So you've got a user, a visitor of some sort come into your website, and what we do is we have a tiny little bit of code that you copy and paste into your website, and if you can't figure it out, then our team will help you with it. But we put a little bit of code on your website, and what we do is we use that code to evaluate if that customer's been there before. If they've been there before, then we send down a cookie to them, or we update a cookie on their machine, and then we send that same information up to Convirza so that we can keep track of what's going on with that client for each and every visit, and we continue to log that visit every single time they come. So after that, we serve them up a specific phone number for them. So in this case, it ends in 1266. Now, let's say you have the next visitor. He's going to get a different phone number. And these pooled numbers, they're just a pool, and you can control and manipulate it. And for the next visitor, he gets a different phone number. So every time somebody comes to your website, they actually get served up a different number based on the way you want that set up. So people ask me this question all the time. They're like, well, what if they call your regular business line number? Well, it rings and it will get you, but now you're not getting the value of the web analytics that you could get from knowing which person came and was served up which numbers. And if you actually look at a lot of modern websites, they actually do this already. And so we'll address some of those. There's a lot of value in this, and we'll just leave it at that. So that's the high level concept of how session DNI works. If you have questions about that, drop them in the chat so we can take a look at those later. But I tried to make this so easy to understand that people get it. And I'll show you an example in a minute and kind of show you how those numbers are represented. Most customers, and I will say like 99% of customers that come to a website with DNI enabled never know that DNI is enabled. They just see the phone number, and honestly, by today's standards, we teach you how to make a click-to-call number. So whether they're on their phone or on their computer, they can just click or type, and they're off to the races. So remember how I said that link DNI or URL DNI is often overlooked? Here's kind of a quick example of how that works. So you send a great email out, and in fact, this is your best email ever. And inside your email, you have your call to action, which is this link. And that call to action is actually going to send them to a landing page. But on the end of the landing page, what we can do is we can actually append a specific phone number for that person who clicked on the link. So when they get to the landing page, we will tell the website to change to the landing page number that it should have. So if you went to this web page, which is really ugly, and I did it in like 2 seconds, that phone number would quickly switch to the phone number that was part of the email, and we automatically update that for you. So this gives you visibility into other types of links that you might be using. Let's say, for example, you do a guest post on somebody else's blog, and you want to find out when you provide them the link back to your website, maybe you want to append it with a phone number so that you can see which calls come from that post. Or if you, in this example, I actually went and ran this. I generated a link for you, and you can see how that number appends and then dynamically updates the web page phone number for you. So it's just a really quick example to see it so you kind of understand what that is. I see a lot of customers using this specifically with banner ads. If you're doing them, if they're still working for you. I see people doing it in email marketing. I see people doing it when they need a link on somebody else's property. Those are all very good use cases for this type of strategy. And then I mentioned earlier kind of the source DNI example. This is really very similar to link DNI, except that when a visitor comes from each of different sources, and right now I had all search engines, but it could just as easily come from Yelp or any other directory. You can set up your website to say, if this comes from this location, serve them up this number. And I would consider this more of a basic implementation, but for some customers, the use case and dipping your toe into call tracking, this might be a good first step for you to finding out what's going to work best and be most effective. But it just gives you an idea, if I were to go and look and evaluate our traffic, by the way, this is representative of our traffic, the majority of our calls actually come through from Google. The next biggest is Yahoo, and then I have a little bit of a trickle coming in from Bing. So maybe there's an opportunity in Bing. I'm going to track that over time, but it gives you kind of a quick idea of overall traffic sources. And like I said, you can apply this strategy to almost any traffic source, any website that drives traffic to you. In some cases, we have customers using it from reseller partners or third-party vendors. They want to capture and see if the traffic coming from certain referral programs is driving calls for them. So those are some kind of quick example, a little bit about how the call tracking works. Obviously, the super high level here is people pick up the phone, they call you, and you want to know where the call came from. And so when you start looking at call tracking, that would be what I would consider basic call tracking. You're routing one call into your business and then routing it to your team in some way or fashion. The next use cases for call tracking really come back to this idea of capturing the customer journey. And remember how I talked about session and visitor level DNI or visitor level tracking a few minutes ago? This is what I would consider more of a realistic example of a customer journey. And so if you work from left to right, you're going to see that on the left, you have some type of ad that you're running in Google today, and you're targeting a specific keyword. Well, what we're going to do is Google's going to pass that data to us. We're going to capture it. And maybe today they decide not to make a phone call. So 5 days later, they do another search and they end up going to a partner website. They get referred to you, and then they end up back on your site, and then they don't call again. And then maybe 2 days later after that, they're doing an organic search and they find some of your SEO content that you have. They come to your website, they're browsing around, and they still don't make a call. Now, maybe a day later, they come back directly to your website. They're starting to feel that trust. And then after that last visit, then they finally pick up the phone and decide to make a call. And if you're looking at last touch attribution, then what you're seeing is all of my traffic coming to my website is converting. I just need to drive more people there. When in reality, there's this whole customer journey behind that organic visit that actually converted that customer into a client, or converted that visitor into a client. And so being able to map that out and figuring out those patterns is super valuable for future marketing campaigns and for planning. In our examples that we have here, this is what I would consider kind of a Google ad example. This is a Facebook ad example. I had people running Facebook ads. 2 days later, they Google search and they go back in to find that same company, and then they make a call. So the first time they see the ad, they click on it, they go to your website, they decide not to go. A couple of days later, they decide, yeah, I really do want to buy that product, or I want to sign up for that service, or I need to talk to that guy, and then they pick up the phone. Here's kind of a typical LinkedIn example. So if you're a B2B marketer, this might be a little bit more down your alley, but you get the idea that every single customer comes through on specific paths. And so being able to figure out what those paths are that lead to conversion, there are conversions that turn into web form fills, that turn into, or in a software company, a demo request. But there's also the conversions, which are people pick up the phone and they set up an appointment, or they set up a reservation, or they set up a sale. And being able to actually identify that that call was in fact a sale is part of the reason why call tracking is so valuable today. Because it's not just the ability of tracking the fact that there was a call and from which source it came, but it's mapping that call to its outcome. And that's when those become incredibly valuable, because now you're actually seeing which ads turn into sales. And if you're a marketer and you know that you've got a handful of keywords that turn into sales, you don't have to promote the other ones as heavily for generating calls. And now you've got a lever that you can pull and say, hey, I think I need to generate more calls. Let's run more campaigns in this arena. And then you can start to see the difference between what stuff's converting at what levels. And I remember how I was telling you about the visitor level tracking. This is an example of a screenshot right out of Google Analytics, where we actually go in, and because our data is in there, you're actually seeing that last step is actually a call down that path. And because obviously I was pulling it out of some proprietary data, we had to scrub it a little bit. But if you look at even from 39 all the way down, these are all paid search related examples. So these people are coming in through paid search, then they come back in direct, and then they make a call. This one, 41, paid search, then they came direct, then they came back through an ad again, then they came back direct, then they made a call. understanding this ecosystem can be very, very valuable depending on the strategies that you have in place for your business. So here are some call tracking best practices and some key considerations. One, if you even think that you're generating calls from your website, getting that visitor level tracking down, leveraging our native integration with Google Analytics is going to give you the ability to get some insight that you may not already have. The next piece that's a best practice is actually mapping those marketing objectives to the outcomes. So unlike other vendors in our space, because we can determine what a conversion is and we can evaluate whether there was an appointment on a call, we can actually map outcomes back to marketing results. So it's not just a theoretical number. We can give you a hard number that says this call had an appointment, and then that appointment now is worth this much money to our business because out of 3 appointments we close one. So those are the types of things that you want to be able to map the outcomes back to the calls. Another key consideration for particularly when you're looking in this arena is thinking about the idea of an unlimited parameter capture. So one of the things that's unique to Convirza in this case, and keep in mind, I wanted this to be more best practice related, but you have customers coming and we have the ability to go in and recover any cookie information. So if you wanted to capture additional information from a customer who's a visitor and you wanted to get information from them at a more detailed or granular level, we can help you gather more in-depth data. So depending on your level of sophistication, for many of you, this is it's a non-starter, no big deal, doesn't matter. But for those of you who really need to get granular into the metrics, some of our clients that are kind of on the bigger side for e-commerce, that they actually still generate calls, even though it's a shopping cart model, their parameter capture is very important to them. For other people, it's specific information related to callers that are looking for automotive products. Getting some more granular detail for those guys, I see them adopt this type of a strategy all the time. And then really having the ability to have number deployment options, being able to scope DNI to your best advantage, being able to put numbers, the right kinds of numbers in the right locations, the ability to add, whether it's a vanity or a custom phone number or a true 1-800 number, having all those things being in a flexible deployment environment create a lot of value for businesses. So those would be some areas that I would recommend that you evaluate for best practices. And then obviously at Convirza, we wrap that around with our conversation analytics technology so that each of those components can be strengthened by our ability to analyze the calls and their outcomes. So I know this is a question on your minds. I've had this question maybe like 300,000 times. I'm just kidding about that. But does call tracking hurt SEO? And really the gist of this question is does call tracking hurt local SEO? And so what I wanted to do is I went and pulled a little bit of research around to explain this. There's a little bit of research out there on the key components of local SEO strength. And so if you look at what I want you to do is I want you to think about these ranking factors and look at their value. So your business signals, your keywords in your business title, your link strength influence your web page ranking factors. Now on-page signals, which would be the presence of your NAP, and NAP is name, address, and phone number. And consistency in your NAP is something that Google looks at as a ranking factor. So if you're a local business and you want to rank locally, then you want to have a consistent NAP. Now, what's really funny is that you see the NAP show up for on-page signals, but you also see it for citations from other organizations referencing you. So when you start looking at those components, and then you look at the other organic ranking factors, you see that NAP consistency and the presence of a NAP is very valuable. So if you look at a lot of companies that want to generate calls, they'll have their schedule, and they'll have their phone number listed on their website. Now, what makes Convirza a little bit unique is that that phone number, we have the ability to tell Google that this is our main phone number. So we actually allow you to maintain your NAP, but when visitors come and we see them come from the areas that you're targeting, not necessarily the Googlebot, we can say, hey, swap out the number. So if the Googlebot comes, it sees your NAP and it's fine. And if a visitor comes, then we say switch the number. And so from a consistency standpoint, the only area that I would ask questions about and get into more details is if you are doing a ton of referral business from lots of different locations and you're trying to keep your NAP consistent across those other locations, that you may want to set up a single tracking number for all of those. It'll make it a little bit harder to get the data out, but you can still get the call analytics. So there's some trade-offs there. And we can talk about that at another time, but I just want to suffice it to say is that there are strategies that leverage call tracking that don't hurt your NAP. And for some businesses, there are some trade-offs. For some of our clients, the trade-off of knowing that it was a conversion or that the call was a missed opportunity is worth a lot of value to them. So understanding this paradigm is important because there is a decision here and some risk for a business to kind of think about. Any other questions on this? Feel free to reach out to me or call Convirza. We're happy to talk to you about it. Now, the way that it works, I'm just going to show you like a quick snippet. This is an example of some of that code that you would copy and paste into your website. And this might feel a little bit technical. It's really not that big a deal. If you go down to this line right here, this CBZ my class href equals this, that is your code snippet. We just have a class ID. It is a class that you're going to design, and we swap that out. And then you get the dynamic number, but the physical phone number will still be there. That physical phone number that's listed is your mainline number, whatever you want for your NAP to be consistent. So having this understanding can definitely help you make better decisions on your strategy. We have lots of clients that have very different strategies. I actually recommend working with our team to figure out what the best strategy is for you, because we have a lot of best practice in those areas that can help you get you where you need to be. So why should I use call tracking? I think fundamentally this comes back into a couple of basic things. One, just getting channel visibility. So I grabbed a screenshot from one of our reports, and when I looked at calls, and this is mock-up data, but I wanted you to kind of understand that if your primary driver for calls is offline media, you better understand what offline media is driving those calls. And if you look at this example, you have online as a big portion, and then you have Google, and then a trickle from Google Plus and Bing, right? Knowing those three big bands are your big sources of calls makes you know that you probably want to spend less money on Bing and Google Plus or doing any ad campaigns there, because you're just not going to get the results that you want. So being able to see your sources, getting that channel visibility, I think is your number one, get going and create instant value for your business. Value number two is really defining good leads. And in my world, I would say the definition of a good lead is changing, and let me tell you why. Most of the people that I talk to, when they think about leads, they think about the awareness stage, the top of the funnel. That's where they're thinking about their leads. And I would consider those not leads. I'd consider those prospects. And if you are a marketing automation person, it's the difference between a lead and a marketing qualified lead. And then that turns into a sales qualified lead. So if you're thinking about the maturity model in that context, a lot of people focus on awareness at the top. And the reality is that you're running marketing programs right now, but when you generate a call, Customers don't call when they're at the awareness stage. They've already done their research. They've already considered other vendors. They're at the evaluation stage. They're looking to make a purchase. And in fact, calls convert at 33, depending on your industry, between 29 and 30% of the time. So wouldn't you want way more of those leads than top of the funnel leads that may never convert into anything? That's the way I want people, and that's the way I'm seeing bigger businesses are starting to realize this. So there's a lot of push in the call tracking arena for people to optimize calls because they close faster, they have shorter sales cycles, they have less time, less investment, and they are a key component to closing a business sale. Now, one of the things I think is really interesting when we're evaluating calls and we're defining what a good lead is, usually from a business perspective, a good lead is the one that we handed off to sales. Now, what happens if you hand that lead off to sales, and let's say in the context of a phone call, you've got some calls that are converting and others are failing. So what if you could do something with that information? What if you could actually recover a missed opportunity where a salesperson failed to handle a call properly? What would that do for your business? Well, for a lot of call tracking companies, what happens is, even though that percentage, you'd be surprised, it actually is very high, that agents, maybe through lack of training or lack of information, maybe don't handle a prospect as well as they could. What we can do, and remember the call outcomes automation I was talking about earlier, what Convirza does is we'll tell you that that call actually was a missed opportunity. We send an email to a manager or to a more senior rep, and that email comes with the recording. They listen to the recording, they call the customer back. So you get a chance, a second chance at bat for that customer to go win the deal. Now, what I see in market is between a 5% and 20% conversion rates on those recovered calls. So if you're a typical business and you generate even a small number of calls per day, and you follow industry numbers, about 25% of your calls are missed opportunities. So if you're getting, let's say you're only getting 8 calls a day, that means that 2 out of your 8 calls are actually missed opportunities that you could call back for recovery, and the recovery number is between 5 and 25%. So even at just 5%, you're going to call back that customer, you're going to get them back on the phone, and you're going to recover that deal. And knowing that you're basically retargeting somebody who already called you gives you a huge advantage in getting that deal closed. Now, if you're selling a $200 product, if you close one of those missed opportunities over an entire month's period of time, then you basically have free call tracking, because call tracking really isn't that expensive. So if you're in that targeted price point, or you meet any of these other requirements, and you can recover even just 1 or 2 missed opportunities in an entire month, then you basically get call tracking for free. So why wouldn't we do that, right? The other component I wanted to mention is the fact that you're broadening your funnel at the bottom. Think about, instead of it, trickling down into a drizzle, you actually get a chance to open the funnel right at the bottom and introduce customers back into the flow without starting back at the top on the marketing investment. So just want to touch on those things. The third big category is really about getting better analytics. So a lot of people ask me, so what is conversation analytics services? Why is it such a big deal? And the big deal is really this idea that most vendors in our market space use what I would consider a nice approach to trying to analyze a call. What they do is they turn those calls into transcripts, and then they go look for specific keywords. But they don't actually listen to the calls themselves. They turn that over to you, and they make you do the work. So now you're like, okay, if the phone call had the word appointment in it, that would be a desirable outcome. I want to measure that. And so you put that into your engine, and it says appointment. And if you're using, a legacy call tracking platform, and you see the word appointment in this example that we have here, it says, I can't make my appointment today. Is that a conversion or not a conversion? Well, conversation analytics is contextual. We look at words, phrases, and combinations of phrases to understand the context, the tone, and what the intent of the person was when they said those words. So we actually look at it in aggregate, and what that required us to do is actually build a very complicated and large library to get to the accuracy levels that we have. And our clients, our competitors really can't do that. And so they're going down some new paths to try and figure out how to do that. But right now, if you look at the second example, okay, I'll see you then, we see that as an acknowledgement of an appointment, and there's no way that our competitors would see that as an appointment. There's just not enough language there for them. There's no one word that you could choose or a combination of words. You would need to be very phrase aware. And that's really what conversation analytics is all about, is being aware of an entire conversation and looking at its intent. So when we went, we had a third-party partner. They asked us to help them leverage some of our competitors' products, believe it or not, so they could get better results. We actually helped them. They do so much business with us that it was worth it for us to help them and to give us a chance to look at other platforms and strategies people were doing, and we couldn't make their platform any better than this. So with our language knowledge, with our language set, helping our partner, who's a joint, they use multiple call tracking vendors because they're a bigger type of a vendor, we couldn't get their numbers better than this. And the reality is most people, what we find is they just can't get to that level of conversation. So what we wanted to say, the point of this is that our accuracy is much higher than everybody else's, and even having an expert tune our competitors' products couldn't get them to where they wanted to be. And the reality is that they want to know, is the call converting? Is the call an appointment? And if you look at it on a whole, and you can start to see the story around conversation analytics, you can see the big gap in appointment set language, sales language. Sales inquiry is a very powerful factor. Let me tell you why. This is measuring whether a buyer on the lead side is using buying language. Wouldn't you want to know all the times that your buyers are using strong buying language? And so for me, if you look at those categories, you can see why that story can be so compelling and so advantageous for a business. So what we're seeing is the best companies in the world want to understand what actually happens on a call, because the reality is that it's about a dialogue, it's about a conversation, and really it's all about a conversation. So when I went through, I was doing some research with some of our top marketers that we work with, and I asked them an open-ended question: why do top marketers listen to calls? And that wasn't the question. I said, why do you listen to phone calls? And I went through and I analyzed the results. And what I found was really surprising. 57% of the people I talked to use it for training purposes. And even on the marketing side, they said, I want to train my people answering the phones to use the right type of language. Now, this is sales training, but what was surprising to me was it was also messaging training. They were finding that people were losing deals because they weren't staying on message and they weren't having a good strategy there. The next component, the next highest, was evaluating the lead quality. Being able to listen to calls so that you know which calls are stronger than others, super valuable to these clients. They want to know if there's a conversion. They want to do it because they want to prove value to their clients, and they want to optimize marketing. Now, let me show you something I think was a very interesting theme. If you look at all of these bottom four, those are 100% marketing team related. 100% marketing team related. I would say it's very interesting that the best marketers in the world are listening to phone calls to find out if marketing's working. I had one in one of the examples in the optimized marketing bucket was, I'm listening to calls because I want to hear if they're using our latest promotion. And I thought, what a very compelling way to do that. Now, here's something else that's very interesting. We have the ability to customize that conversation analytics so that if you wanted to target a specific promotion for your business, you could actually have a custom indicator built to evaluate and determine language for something specific for you. So if you look at this, you can see how listening to calls can create value. Well, we help you automate listening to calls so that you can prioritize down and only listen to the ones that are the ones that you need to touch on to get the most value for you and your business. So a couple of tricks to increase calls. I promised I'd do this, and we're getting close to the end of the hour here. Memorable numbers. Believe it or not, the data still holds true today as it did 10 years ago with creating either a name number combination or a true like a vanity number situation. They're still driving 31% more calls. So if you had a phone number, if you're a consultant or if you're a business and it's 1-800 for David, then people remember your number and they call you more. Every instance that we've tried it, about a 31% higher call rate if you went from a regular phone number to a vanity or a named number. Making your number a click-to-call number. It's a digital world. If your number's not click-to-call on your website, you're throwing away revenue. Just to give you an idea, click-to-call, Google ad revenue was up 19% from last year. It's at 54% of their revenue now is from mobile ads. So if you're a PPC marketer, you already knew that. But what you didn't know is that those people aren't tolerating not clicking on a button to call you. The Google ad revenue from mobile that's impressive. But if you think about Facebook, 88% of Facebook traffic today is from mobile. So if you're running ads on Facebook and your call to action is a call, you definitely want to be thinking about being a little bit more mobile friendly in that arena. Using a call to action as a CTA drives calls. I know it sounds simplistic, but if your call to action is to fill out a web form, that's what you're going to get. If your call to action is to pick up the phone, that's what you're going to get. So make it easy on customers. Try some campaigns that have very specific calls to action that are call related. Those are some good tests to see how those campaigns are doing. And you can run them just like you would any other A/B test. Obviously, tracking sources and campaigns that generate more conversions. I find that a lot of our customers we talk to generate a ton of revenue and opportunity there because they find the channels that are working the best. And then they reallocate money from the channels that are not quite as successful to the ones that are most successful. And we routinely see even a 300 in most cases. We see really high return on investment from people just reallocating marketing dollars. Here's a quick example. One of our customers is Wheeler Cat. They were actually at the bottom of all the cat dealers. They implemented conversation analytics to track their marketing effectiveness and their call effectiveness. And they actually they sent us this picture thanking us because they moved into first place, leveraging our platform to get them there. So if you're looking to uncover revenue opportunities, optimize cost per acquisition, create your closed loop models, predict ROI, these are the types of things that you can do with call tracking. And that is it, my friends. One last thing, for anybody who attends today, we actually have a special offer for you. Go ahead, pick up the phone, give Convirza a call, and if you use the code word Master Your Marketing, we'll give you, on any of our plans, we'll give you access to conversation analytics for the next 90 days. So if you do it and you have good luck with it, you might find that you get free call tracking out of it because the ROI will be there for you. So just wanted to make sure that we did that. I only have just a minute here for questions. Kate, since I can't see any of the questions, can you help me out here on that? Are there any ones I can address really quick?
Absolutely. So it seems that we had a couple of questions around the customer journey. So you were speaking about that, and someone had asked if you could clarify how you're able to identify which ads turned into sales on the customer journey. I believe this is when you're talking about PPC marketing and call tracking.
Yeah, perfect. So one of the things that's really nice about Google is when you click on an ad and that ad goes to your landing page, now whether that landing page, any page on your site, Google actually packages up that data really nicely for us, and we just capture what they're sending. So when you go from one page to the next page, Google packages that data up, we just capture it, and we put it into, for you, we put it into a consumable format. Either you can see it through the call results, or we take that information, we add the call result, and then we push it into Google Analytics. So, so the Google Analytics component of that is what connects all those pieces together. And like I said, if you have questions on that, we can definitely help you get there.
Great. And I know we're a little over, but we have two more that are related to that. So I want to make sure to address those because I think these were great questions. So another person had asked, how do you deal with people who start out searching on a desktop or tablet and then finally pull up the website through their phone and make the call that way? Is there a way to identify that this is still the same customer?
You know, that is actually a really good question. When they're bouncing between different types of devices. Now, behind the scenes, we know that Google's doing a little bit of stuff back there. The reality is that for us, because those cookies are device specific, we don't correlate those two yet. But I have a sneaky suspicion that Google's going to add some abilities here in the next little while that will make that the next level of visibility possible. But like you said, a lot of those cross-platform situations, they're really hard for people to solve. I don't know of anybody who has any great answers to it. The only way that people are going to succeed doing it is with shared visitor identification. Now, if you use Chrome on your phone and your computer, for example, and you log in with Google, the Google Visitor ID, I'm not sure if it's going to be the same between platforms. That's a very good technical question. If you want to ping me offline, I can go dig that up for you. But there is some potential that we might be able to gather that if the Google ID is the same between, if you're logged in, you have a Google account, and you go from a Chrome browser on one device to a Chrome browser on the other, there is a possibility that it would connect it in Google Analytics automatically. So small possibility. Publicly, Google doesn't announce that they have that capability, but if you'll email me at ddanielson@convirza.com, I can go dig that up for you.
Great, thank you. And then kind of another question related to this. So someone had asked, talking again about this customer journey, how can they find it on their Google Analytics? Sorry, how on their Google Analytics can they find where it tracks it? So in the picture that you had presented, it said the order that somebody had found the company, and they're wondering in their analytics, how do they see that? Is that something that happens through working with Convirza, or is that always in Google Analytics?
So Google Analytics has that map already. It's under the behavioral analysis. Keep in mind, I'm not in front of Google Analytics right now, so I'm walking you through pretty blind. If I remember right, I think it's in the behavioral section, the behavioral reports. And then if you really want to know, email me and I'll actually go look at the path for you and give you the steps for that. The reality is that Google Analytics does that already, but what they don't do is they don't connect the calls to any of those other ads. So they look like they're in isolation a little bit until we give them the call context that connects all the visitors back, those visitor steps, to the call itself. So Google Analytics does provide that kind of data, but they don't cascade it for you because the cascading happens. That's what Convirza does in the middle.
Got it. Thank you. And we'll take the last question here, and then if there was any other questions we didn't get to, Certainly, I think you had mentioned people are more than welcome to follow up with you to clarify anything else. Obviously, we want to be respectful of everybody's time. But the last question is sort of more of a general question for call analytics that Brittany had asked. How do you combat the argument of people saying, I want people to remember my normal phone number. It's something I'm using to brand my company.
The way that I couch that is a couple of things. I think that the way that I'm seeing people handle that the best is that they actually look at different scenarios. And the scenario picture that I paint is, do you think marketing's the same today as it was then? And I actually run, believe it or not, I have some numbers for a vanity number campaign, and it is 8668 vanity. And I want people to remember that because it's attached to a vanity campaign that I'm running. So anytime in the future, I'm going to see the value of that specific campaign or of that business component. But if somebody makes their way to our website, it's not because they remembered my phone number. So from a brand integrity standpoint, I might even still list that number, but I would look at how you want to structure. If you don't have any web traffic, then there's no argument. But if you have a bunch of web traffic and you're not sure that it's converting, then now that's a really good conversation to have. There are some best practices. The reality is that you're going to have to test it. You're going to have to run DNI in isolation, even with your static phone number, and find out if the data that's coming from those calls is more valuable than the calls that you're getting by people remembering your number. The reality is that I have customers that do both. They have a very memorable phone number and they use DNI because they want to see the sources that generated those calls that came through the web, which, by the way, aren't usually the same type of calls that you get by remembering a phone number. Different groups of people. And so from that standpoint, I see a lot of people running it together. But I've heard the observation, and the question comes back to, is the call data valuable to you? For most of the customers I talked to today, it is, and they decide to try both.
Got it. So that makes sense. It sounds like, with something with like print advertising or something where people need to memorize a number, certainly associated with the branding, but from a web standpoint where they may just be clicking on the number, obviously, then it might get into seeing the value in the call tracking, it sounds like. Yep.
Yeah, and it's really funny because I see people try that strategy and they use the same name, but they manage to acquire 6 or 7 different phone numbers. So I have, 8666 vanity, 8668 vanity, because I want them to remember the vanity part. They might not get the exact digit right, but that's very different from each campaign. So one campaign, I might run in an advertising outdoor environment, and another one's on a flyer. Well, they're still going to remember the number, whichever one they had exposure to, but rarely are they being exposed to multiple. Now, if you're in a defined region, that strategy might not work really well for you. You might want to just stick to, this is my traditional advertising number, and these are my digital advertising numbers, and you think about them in a different context. But yeah, I mean, if I'm running something on the radio and on a billboard, and I want them all to remember the same number, then you go to the same number. In that case, what I would do is that it's really good, but you don't know which of those 3 is generating the most calls. So getting visibility it's a trade-off sometimes. So, and I understand the concern.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, David, for going through all these specifics and for answering the questions. Again, everybody will be sending out within the next 24 hours a link to a replay of this webinar, as well as the PDF of the slides. And if you have any further questions, please do reach out to David at Convirza and make sure to take advantage of this special offer for attendees. And thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you on a future webinar.
Thanks, everyone.